Well, hello there. My name is HW.
Hey, I'm the Sooze.
Sooze, today we're talking about how to dial in your Kemper like a pro.
Yeah.
And even though we've covered some of this, I think it was time to address the liquid profiles that are out there and how that kind of changes how we dial in the Kemper. Because I think the first step to getting great Kemper tone used to be find a great profile. Mm-hmm. And that kind of what went along with that was finding the right gain range.
Okay.
But now we've got these liquid profiles, and we can just up the gain range all we want. Like here's the same profile but dirty it without touching anything else. Obviously, the bass goes way up there, whereas it doesn't if we had that same profile with a generic stack.
Yeah.
So now we're kind of subjected to all of the idiosyncrasies of all of the tone stacks that are in here. You know what I'm saying? So if you got a plexi tone stack and that happens, what do? How do you use some of these deeper controls to sort of affect your sound? And should you?
Yeah.
I think the answer is you should. Because even though the liquid profile stacks provide accuracy, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to sound better. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And in this case, it kind of brings in a bit of a challenge. So this is a really good example. We got the 74 purple plexi, which is kind of I gotta be honest, kind of my favorite of the purple plexis.
Yeah.
Sorry, 68.
You're
I
out of
kind
here.
of like the 74 a little better. I don't know why.
I tend to agree. Yeah.
Here, let me clean this up a little bit. I'm going to have you play again, and you're on the bridge, so this shouldn't be an overly bassy sound. But how are we going to tame that bass? This is a really good example of how we use some of the deeper controls. And so I can put the bass back to 5. Even all the way up on this clean thing is not really too much. This goes back to something we've said so many times, like plexi tone stacks don't do a ton. That didn't change the sound in a way that was... We really couldn't get too much or too little. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We could...
They're not super extreme.
Yeah, they're not super extreme. But you roll this thing up,
full gain.
What are we doing, But for science. I mean, it's like woofy, it's big.
Yeah.
It's cool. But even if we cut the bass all the way down to 0, check out what it still sounds like.
Still pretty big.
It's still big.
Yeah.
Now, this is normally what I would do on the real plexi. I would put the bass down to 0 because you don't need any more help. The normal channel is doing so much work,
Yeah.
To give you all of that. And this is a jumpered profile here. So it's giving you so much. It's giving you all the gain it's got,
Right.
And that's a lot of low end. So how are you going to do it? Well, this is where I think, even though having that authenticity might be king to some, this is where the Kemper really shows that it can do a lot, in that we have the deep editing stuff. So here is where I would not overly concern myself with accuracy. Oh, but that's not exactly how the plexi sounded, when it was mic'd up. I would just up this definition control and see if we can get rid of some low end there. So I'm going to go from 4.7 to 7.1. Try this now.
Yeah, it's a lot better. Yeah.
A lot better. I could take it way down, and we could maybe make a problem even worse.
No definition.
No definition. And what is that definition?
Yeah.
In the past, I've said it's kind of it's like the closest thing that you've got to sort of being there, and maybe adjusting, whether it sounds brighter or darker. And there definitely is some of that going on.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get that woofy quality, the definition is like the opposite of that. The more definition, the better it gets. Now, to me, it still sounds good. It still sounds like a plexi.
Yeah.
Try that again. This is a plexi on 10, by the way. So I'm up in the definition, and that's not on the real amp, but hey, still, I would rather have this sound, to be honest.
Right.
There's that type of thing. I've also got clarity here. Mm-hmm. Don't ask me what it does. It just changes the sound. But sometimes I really like the way it changes the sound.
For science.
What does that do?
I don't know.
Dude, I've read in the manual what it does, and it doesn't feel like it does that. It's supposed to add sort of a clean high end back in that gives it some clarity so that you don't, and it kind of does something like that. And my understanding is it works more on dirtier profiles, but try it on 0 and then we'll try it on 10.
I don't know, man. It's definitely like it almost feels like a clean mix got added in a little bit. It's not the same as like this direct mix control, but I don't know, it takes away some of the raw dirt.
Yeah,
of it,
I think there is some of that. It seems to sort of replicate the way that you can have a very hot cooking amp, but you hit a chord and one of the string, I don't know, like the high end doesn't break up as much maybe, or there's kind of, you get, I don't know. I think that is what it's doing. It adds in the upper end kind of clean on top.
Right.
And sometimes I feel like that makes a lot of difference. But usually for me, I feel like it on more mid-gain stuff. I actually heard it here and liked it here a little better. And sometimes, I'll tell you, we make these videos and then I hear things a lot more clearly. Once we're like editing, I hear things a lot more clearly than we do sitting next to this Kemper cap, because people always ask, are we listening to the Kemper cap? They're listening direct.
Yeah.
We're listening through this cabinet sitting right here, and we are not in the optimal location to listen to this cabinet either, right? Like we're very close to it. So, but you can hear what it's doing. And I got to tell you, man, these are the two controls that I kind of use more than anything. I think now with liquid profiles, I mean, obviously you have these controls.
Yeah.
And I used to tell people, start with the definition and start with those things, then use these if you want a little changes.
Yeah.
But if you really want to like get your sound dialed in, find the right profile, play with the definition, kind of match it to the guitar. If you're on a Les Paul and you're like, I don't like the neck, it's too, fix that with the definition. Then ask yourself whether you want more mid-range stuff. Now I almost think it's the opposite. You kind of start with the amp as it is, and you go, okay, here's what I would be getting with the amp. And then after I kind of get that, or I reach the limits, like in this case, we reached the limits of what the bass could do.
Yeah.
Then I would go to some of these deep parameters, and I would play around with these, and then I would, come in here and maybe then at that point start to play with maybe some EQs, and see what I want to do there.
Right.
We can do that. Let's say this is my sound and I still want some further tailoring, I've kind of got this maxed. I've got this maxed. I've got this up here. These also are acting as kind of gain knobs because that's how a plexi operates.
And you would run your plexi similar to this, like
very similar.
Yeah.
I would run it exactly like this. Actually, now I'm looking at it. I mean, this is That's why it defaults to come out like this, because this is how I had it set up when I profiled it. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay.
I guess at this point I would go, okay, let me have this studio EQ and try this. Here's on and off. We're not doing a ton here. So we got some mid pushes. I was going to say, you can obviously hear the high end kind of, there was a little more kerrang.
Yeah.
So at 5K, we're pushing it up. We're pushing the low end up, which is maybe the opposite of what we want to do. But honestly, it sounds good. Sounds like a big fat, Harry Marshall. 1,000's got an extra decibel and 1,700's got an extra decibel. This is one of those cases where if you boost anything, it sounds better, right? So like we're boosting some low end, some high end, some mid range.
Michael Britt,
right?
Just turn them all.
Yeah, just turn them all up a little bit, right? And everything will sound better.
Yeah.
This is where I guess if you wanted to really like affect the sound, maybe here's where I would come in and say, okay, let's say I want some more scoop. Let's get a little more scoop in here. So I'm going to up the bass at like 200. I'm going to leave the low end up, or I'm going to leave the high end up. I'm actually going to cut some mid-range out. Just say you wanted this. I think it sounds great without it, but here's without and with. Maybe that's something you do because you're the rhythm guitar and the vocals are there, and on isolated, it sounds to me like, well, I wouldn't want all that mid range. Right. Why would I get rid of it?
Yeah.
But certainly not too scooped of a sound, and still kind of sounds like a vintage Marshall. So to me, it's about like really getting the most out of the Kemper with liquid profiles is about taking the liquid profile, dialing it in as much as you can with the amp controls. That's how I would tell people to approach it. And you're almost starting with the least powerful things. And maybe that gets you there. It's a bit like maybe, here we go. We always get criticized for talking about food, but everything come back to food. When you're cooking a good steak, you find the right cut of steak first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't like put, ground beef on a grill and expect to get a filet mignon out.
Throw seasoning on it.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But you get a really good cut of steak, you get some salt and pepper, you cook it right. Come on.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Yeah, sure.
Now, maybe you want more. Maybe you're like my son. You're very partial to, garlic salt, garlic powder.
Yeah.
Maybe you're like, hey, Dad, can you put some of that truffle and Parmesan powder on this steak? I go, okay, well, we're certainly going in a direction now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe you're like, no, I want to do a traditional peppercorn, and then and I want to put a little hollandaise on that. You still got to start with the steak. You still got to get the steak right and cook it right.
Yeah, the foundation
before you add the hollandaise. Yeah. Maybe you're doing a coffee cure. Obviously, you might put some of these things on before you cook the steak. But the point is, you're going to cook the steak well. There's no seasoning you're going to add to steak. There's no sauce. You're not going to make a lovely béarnaise and go, it would go great with this béarnaise, an overdone steak.
Yeah.
You won't do that.
Right.
It would go great with this if my steak wasn't a steak, if it were, maybe you'd do that, if it were chicken. But you know what I mean? A different amp. Then it's a different amp.
Yeah.
And so I think it's about going after some of that authenticity and the things we love about amps, but really quickly you run into the limits of amps, and that's where this thing shines. It's not heavy like an amp. It's not too loud like an amp.
That's true.
It doesn't have one sound like an amp.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it doesn't have one setting. I mean, a lot of amps, classical amps like this, you want to clean it up, you're left with your guitar, or you got to run back there and clean it up. Or you got to rely on your dirty sound coming from a boost, or you got to figure it out.
Yeah. Definitely no clarity control or definition.
No clarity, no definition. Yeah. Those are all, this sort of studio things. We didn't even get into, there's cabinet controls, and we don't have to get into this, but, high shift, low shift. Yeah. This is a little bit like moving a microphone around.
Which might have helped with the bass, too. Yeah.
Totally would have helped. We could have shifted some of that bass up, or we can use an EQ, or we can use a definition. we can figure out kind of what we the best way to tackle the limitations of the amp. So to me, that's how you get at this stage of the game with liquid profiling. That's how you get the absolute most out of your Kemper. That's how you dial in the Kemper like a pro.
I love it.
I've been HW.
I've been Sooze.
Later. That was great.
Wow.
That was great.